So hello everyone, I'm Naomi and I'm a product designer here at Rangle. Tonight I'll be talking to you about how the first experience that you design is for your stakeholders and why your project's success depends on it. Before we get started, I have one quick but important note. And that's this talk contains collaboration. Giving this talk was a collaborative effort between myself and our design lead here at Rangle, Mike Costanzo. So Mike wrote most of the original content, and then in true Agile fashion, we iterated on it collaboratively. So tonight I'll be talking about how you can apply experience design principles to your Agile project kickoff. Applying these principles lets your team build empathy for stakeholders and guide them through an experience that makes them feel comfortable and in control. By the end of this process, your stakeholders will also realize that design isn't just about making things look pretty. It's about getting to the heart of their business objectives and their users' goals. I'll also talk about the psychological triggers that you're setting off when you fail to manage stakeholders' fear and anxiety, and how that fear and anxiety can pave the way to bad decisions and painful project outcomes for you and your team. And finally, I'll talk about how a team can create empathy and meet their stakeholders' business goals by building enjoyable and action-oriented project kickoff experiences. I'll also give you an overview of some of the ways that we do this for projects at Rangle. So why is it important to build empathy for your stakeholders? Well, the short answer is that you really don't want either you or them to start a project feeling like Johnny Depp here. So a bit of background. Because Rangle is a consultancy, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of different clients over a fairly short period of time. Over the last 2 years, we've been able to refine a lean discovery process that lets us rapidly align with our teams with our clients and lay the groundwork for establishing clear communication channels from day one. What we realized over this time is that the first experience that you design is for your stakeholders. First impressions set the tone. If you lose your stakeholders' commitment to the process right at the beginning, you've probably lost it for good. Stakeholders will revert to whatever command and control process they're used to, and you'll lose any hope of running a functioning Agile project. So it's vitally important to start an Agile project off right with clarity and alignment. Because Agile workflows focus less on documentation and more on delivering working software early, this clarity and alignment are even more important to establish during the project kickoff phase. Many of our clients are either taking their first steps into a lean, agile product development process, or they're coming from a company where they've partially implemented an agile process and they need help figuring out why things are still broken. Basically, that agile transformations take time and they take incremental improvement. And what we've learned from this is that you should never underestimate the level of anxiety that these transformations can create for them. If you aren't laser focused and prepared right from the start, what you do is you trigger stakeholders' innate human reflex to revert to past principles and to ways of working that are familiar for them. And people do this out of fear. Your stakeholders have a lot on the line, often their reputations and sometimes even their job or their entire business. So the last thing that you want to do is increase their fear and anxiety because they feel that you, as the designer, don't have a grasp on the magnitude of the situation. So why are fear and anxiety important to manage? These are basic primordial responses to our environment that humans developed long before our rational and logical minds. Fear and anxiety act as signals of danger, of a threat, or of a motivational conflict. Anxiety is a generalized response to an unknown threat or internal conflict, whereas fear is focused on known and external danger. The unknown or uncertainty can trigger anxiety. When someone's anxious, their brain is trying to imagine and prepare for future threats. And it doesn't really matter whether those threats are real or not. One part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, plays a pivotal role in long-term planning, understanding rules, calculating the consequences of risk and reward, regulating emotions, problem solving, and decision making. Scientists also believe that anxiety disrupts our ability to make smart decisions, but you probably don't need science to tell you that last part because you've probably experienced that yourself at some point in time. So, lots of interesting science there about fear, anxiety, and their effects on the human brain. But what does this mean for you as a designer, or as anyone working with stakeholders in an agile process? It means that you can't beat biology, so you need to know how to mitigate against fear and anxiety with a well-designed stakeholder experience. Anxiety is usually the main emotion that you have to be conscious of when you're working with stakeholders who are transitioning to an agile workflow. And you shouldn't underestimate the power of anxiety to affect their decision-making process. So now that we know why we need to create a good stakeholder experience, what's next? First, let's clear up some common stakeholder misconceptions and do what product designers do best. Let's build some empathy. Helping stakeholders feel comfortable and in control is one of those rare situations in life where doing the selfish thing and doing the right thing are one and the same. Building empathy for stakeholders not only makes them feel better and can lead to a more successful project, but it puts you in a position to steer the process. So how can we build empathy for stakeholders? There are 3 simple steps that you can follow. And note that I say simple and not easy. Step 1, drop your ego. Step 2, understand their perspective. And step 3, align on their outcomes. Number 1, dropping your ego. Easier said than done, right? But if you respond to stakeholders with ego, they'll react by digging in their heels and reverting to the command and control structure that they're used to. This will make life difficult for you for as long as you're on the project. This is not what you want. Number 2, understanding their perspective. We need to stop acting like stakeholders are out of touch or that they just don't get it when they make product choices that seem counterintuitive or misguided to us. If you think this way, it'll show, it'll be evident, and you'll miss out on a valuable resource and a valuable project partner. Number 3, align on their outcomes. Build trust. When stakeholders revert to command and control mode, it stems from a self-preservation reflex. This reflex is rooted in anxiety and in a desire to alleviate that anxiety by switching to behaviors that feel safe and familiar to them. So what's a better course of action? In my experience, it's to show them that you understand and that you're committed to the same outcomes as they are. That you want to understand and you need to understand the outcomes that they want to see for their business and their users, and that you're willing to do the hard work that's needed to make this happen. Your goal should be to build a deep and genuine level of trust. Stakeholders aren't just approval machines. As part of an agile team, you need to create empathy for stakeholders just as you would for customers or end users. You might not realize it, but your project is probably one of a dozen things that they're trying to juggle at any given point in time. You need to take this into consideration, just as you shouldn't assume that the only thing that your end users do all day is use the app you're building. Unless that app is Pokemon Go, in which case you're probably right. Your stakeholders have pains and goals. Your job is to alleviate those pains and help them achieve those goals. As a designer, it is in your power to do this by showing them that you care just as much as they do. So how do you do this? It's simple. Ask them what their pain points are and what they hope to achieve. Start a conversation with them, one that you keep on returning to throughout the life of the project. Because without the context of these pains and goals, agile teams will always be out of touch with stakeholders' expectations, simply because they will lack the understanding they need to make the right trade-offs when designing and developing solutions. So how do you build this context? How do you gain this understanding? At Rangle, we've developed a discovery process that's lightweight, repeatable, and teachable. We've built this process with best practices in mind, like lean UX, design thinking, and story mapping. Our goal is to set the tone for decision-making that's decentralized, that's flexible, and that's rooted in high levels of alignment and communication. We call this process Clarity Canvas, and although we apply it to lean, agile software development, we think that it has value across many types of projects. This slide here shows a very high-level overview of our discovery process. Starts off in the left here and leads all the way over to the right into project planning. So I'll be giving an overview of the middle two sections, so kickoff, project alignment, and story mapping or project planning. In our kickoff and project alignment phase, we have Clarity Canvas, which includes 4 sections: project goals, target users, mapping the user journey, and identifying assumptions and risks. In the first 2 sections, what we do is we ask a single important question. Working with project stakeholders to arrive at answers to those questions helps give the Scrum team the context that they need to hit the ground running in the right direction on this project. And I'll go into these questions in a little bit more detail in a minute. The project goals and target users sections also set the stage for creating the user journey map, which in turn provides the framework and the context for story mapping, which is the next section over on the right. So in project goals, what we do is we run a diverge, explore, converge set of exercises. On Post-it notes, stakeholders individually write down what outcomes they want to see as a result of completing the project successfully. We facilitate discussion about these outcomes to reveal any differing perspectives or competing priorities amongst the group. Stakeholders then dot vote on which outcomes are most important to them. This lets them identify the main drivers for the project, and we start off by focusing on the outcomes that they want to see most. In the target users and key stakeholders section, we again run through a diverge, explore, converge exercise with the project stakeholders to list all of the people or groups whose goals and concerns we need to address in order to make the project a success. We divide target users into 2 main groups. So we have end users and we have stakeholders. For each user group, we identify their goals and their concerns as they relate to the project. We run another round of dot voting to prioritize the list of end users in preparation for the user journey section. And then finally, in the user journey map, we take the most important goal of the most important end user and map out at a very high level what needs to happen for them to achieve that goal. The stakeholders and Scrum team work on this collaboratively. And time permitting, we repeat this for the next most important goal and so on. If we cover all of those goals for that most important user, we'll also move on to the next most important user. And throughout the Clarity Canvas, we gauge the group's level of confidence in everything that's being discussed and list out anything that needs to be validated or mitigated. And these are the project's risks and assumptions. And they trigger research activities and validation that happen throughout the project. So in my experience, the first 2 sections that focus on outcomes and on key end users can be particularly powerful for stakeholders. Particularly the experience of realizing that what they'd envisioned or what they saw as the main drivers for the project didn't align with what the rest of the group envisioned. And I feel that, I don't know if you guys can see that very well. Can you guys see it okay? Is it kind of blurry? Okay, I'll talk through it. So this is an image that comes from Jeff Patton's user story mapping book, and I feel that this sums it up well. So we have 3 people standing together, and they all have thought bubbles. The first person's picturing a square, second person's picturing a circle, third person's picturing a triangle. And the caption underneath says, I'm glad we all agree here. I'm sure everyone's had this experience. In the next panel, they all draw it on the board, and they all realize that they were picturing something different. They go, oh. They work together to figure out the common ground, how they can arrive at all of these different things they were envisioning. And in the last section there, they've all drawn the same thing, and they say, I'm glad we agree. It's a lot funnier if you don't have to have someone explain every panel to you. So look up the book, it's awesome, and it'll be much better there. So this kind of activity isn't only powerful, but it's ultimately much more effective for project success than just throwing it all in a 50-page or more requirements doc. and expecting everyone to read it and understand that you all mean the same things. So in case you're wondering, we run these activities here at Rangle on our own internal projects. One internal stakeholder said that what he found most valuable about the process was visualizing his thinking and seeing where what he envisioned was different from other stakeholders. He said that the outcome of Clarity Canvas was incredibly valuable for him. Most projects have multiple stakeholders, and what Clarity Canvas does really well is align all those stakeholders right at the beginning of the project. The goals are clear and the outcomes are clear, so there's far less risk and ambiguity. So the next phase we have is story mapping, or product planning. And creating a story map is another effective way to build context and understanding with your stakeholders. At Rangle, we like to move directly into story mapping with the stakeholders and the Scrum team right after doing the Clarity Canvas session. This lets us keep up the momentum that we've built in the project alignment phase and build on the shared understanding that we've created. So if you recall, when creating the user journey map during Clarity Canvas, we took the most important goal of the most important end user and mapped out at a very high level what needs to happen in order for them to achieve that goal. And by doing this, we identified the high-level activities that the user needs to do to get the goal, and the slightly more granular steps that each activity breaks down into. So you can see the activities visualized here in the story mapping section as the red diamond shapes, and the steps are the aqua-colored squares that appear underneath. And in creating the user journey map, we also arrange them in a left-to-right narrative order. So to use a software-based example, say for an email management system, here our activities start with organizing email, managing your email, and managing your calendar, say. So these form the backbone of the user journey map. And each of these activities breaks down slightly more granularly into steps, which we call the walking skeleton. So one of the steps we have for managing your calendar is viewing your calendar. As you can see, that step breaks down into details, which are your user stories. Stories flesh out the details of your user journey, and these have short titles added to them like view appointments or view by month and week, and these make them easy for the team and the stakeholders to refer to. In the story mapping sessions that I've facilitated, participants write a short summary for each story, and then they prioritize the stories. We then slice across the list of stories horizontally to delineate the product releases. So you can't really see it too well in this slide, but after the second row of details, there's actually a line drawn across that says Release 1. And this allows the team to build incrementally on actual flows that provide value to users, rather than just focusing on one feature at a time, one chunk of functionality at a time. So I could probably spend the rest of the evening talking about story mapping, but you probably want to go home eventually, and really, you should just get the book. It's actually a really great read. He's a great author, and it includes funny pictures of cakes. And what's not to love about funny pictures of cakes? So getting back to our original topic of creating a great stakeholder experience, one that helps stakeholders feel comfortable and in control, and helps you and your team learn about their pains and goals. Using a lightweight, teachable, and repeatable process like Clarity Canvas and story mapping allows you to do all of that. It gives you, your team, and your stakeholders the context and the understanding that are needed to make the right trade-offs when designing and developing products, and hopefully minus the fear and anxiety. So in the near future, we're going to be writing about this process in detail on the Rangle blog, including how our design and delivery process creates an agile project management solution, how to facilitate Clarity Canvas with all the nuances that involves, how we're scaling Clarity Canvas across the organization, and how it's worked on real projects, warts and all. If this sounds interesting, then please do check back with us often. Follow us on Twitter. We always post our blog updates there. Or you can also sign up for our newsletter, and we'll deliver updates right into your inbox. And we're also hoping to run a workshop on how to facilitate Clarity Canvas in an upcoming Agile XD meetup. So please stay tuned for that. And thank you all very much for coming and listening this evening.